Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Gorilla HR, the podcast. I'm Becky Droz, and today we are continuing our series about workplace culture. Now, if you have been listening, you know that we've talked about culture, what it is. It is more than just free coffee. It is more than just, oh, people seem unhappy right now. Go buy them some pizza. Culture is so much more than that. When we think about workplace culture, what we're really talking about is the identity, really the brand of an organization. What are your employees saying about your workplace when they're not at work? Are they saying that this is a great place? They really take care of me? Or are they saying, well, I'm here for now, but I don't really plan to stay there that long. I'm looking for something better. Who do you want to be as an employer? When we think about creating that identity, we really have to think about a lot of different things. Part of that is going to be your business strategy. Are you about offering unique products? Are you about customer service? Are you all about being efficient? That basic strategy that drives your business is also going to feed into how you act as an employer and what your culture is going to look like. Of course, a lot of different things go into that. It might be that you're new as a company. So, where you are in the life cycle is going to determine part of that culture as well. Versus if you are a long-time successful business, you've got lots of money to pour into the things that you can do for people, culture is going to vary. So, I completely understand that there's a lot that goes into it. When we think about culture and we think about what we provide and create that identity, it is going to be different everywhere. No two employers are going to be the same, and they don't need to be. You just need to think about who do you want your employees to be and what kind of service do you want to get from them. Essentially, what you're doing is you're creating that value proposition. So you're thinking about what are we providing to our employees in order to get them to show up for us and either just show up and be a warm body or show up and be a kick ass body where you're getting great results from people. So we really want to think about who are we? What are we providing so that we get what we want from our people? One of the things that we're going to talk about with this series, and we're going to dive into this today, is on talent development. So, a lot of people that I hear on the employment side say, I'm really looking for people who want careers. I don't want people who just want jobs. Well, in order to do that, you have to provide some things to keep people happy and keep them growing. So I'm super pumped today. Today I have Ashley Wood. Ashley is an incredibly experienced HR practitioner who has a really strong talent development background. So I'm super excited to welcome Ashley to Gorilla HR, the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Becky. I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you. I've known Ashley for quite some time, so we've had a lot of conversations about these things, and this is one where I'm like, we should be telling the world our great idea. So I'm glad you're
Absolutely.
here, so we can actually do that. Let's just go right for it. So when I think about talent development, there's a lot to it. And it's not just like I'm going to set up one little class and that's going to be that. So when I think about talent development, I'm going to break it up into three different areas. So we're going to talk about talent development from the standpoint of immediate right now,
Okay.
short-term goals, and then long-term goals. So the one I'm going to start with is obviously we're going to go in order. We're going to go with the immediate. So one of the things that I hear from employers is that we have people who are entering the workforce and they have no fucking clue how to be an employee. They don't know what to do. They have grown up where everybody gets the trophy, everybody gets the reward, and they don't even know how to act. Let me tell you a funny story really quick. I had a job, this was several years ago, and we were a small HR team, but we did have a little HR team. And we hired somebody who was fresh out of college, had never had a real professional job before, and it was her birthday. So I brought in a birthday cake and I set it by her desk that morning. When I walked in, I set down the birthday cake and I was like, yay, happy birthday. So glad you're here and that we get to celebrate your birthday with you. And went to my desk and did my business because it's work, right? So that afternoon, fast forward, it's about 1 o'clock. It's after lunch. And I walk over and I'm like, oh, well, let's have some cake. Where's the cake? And she's like, oh, I took it home. So she did not know that in the professional work world, bringing in a cake is to share and enjoy together. She thought I was just bringing her a birthday cake to take home and eat. So at lunchtime, she took home her birthday cake. And I can tell you, I was pretty pissed because I was looking forward to some cake.
Right? Who would it be?
So even though it felt super awkward, I had to step aside and explain that in a professional environment, this is how we celebrate birthdays, da 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 da. So that in the future, people weren't like, gosh, what is wrong with her? Because she just didn't know. And so she had to be educated. So that is just a fraction of what it looks like when we think about new employees coming in. But let's talk about when we do have new workers and those folks who they just don't know how to be employees. What are you seeing employers do, or what strategies are people putting into place to say, let's get the new people up to speed? And I
Absolutely.
don't just mean cake.
That's a great story, though. I would be mad too. I would, if I bring cake, I definitely want a piece of it. This is a huge area, especially when I talk to different clients or different companies across the Carolinas. Everybody is trying to find a way to teach, so to say, and they feel like their managers are having to parent, for lack of a better word, those new hires or the younger generation that's coming into the workforce. And what we've worked with a lot of people this year on is building resiliency, but it starts with the managers, especially those if you're tenured. Management used to be you were just there to manage them, right? And it was only about here's the task, here's what you need to do for work, here's the deadlines, etc. You either do it or you don't do it. Now management is turned into how do we educate those new hires and how do we teach them how to be an actual employee and how to be successful in doing that. So it starts with having that conversation with management and helping them to understand your job's very different than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. You now have to be able to teach them things like resiliency. How do we present in a meeting? How do we dress for work? What's appropriate? What isn't appropriate? I actually saw a video the other day of a girl who took a picture of herself and was crying on the video because she didn't get the job. And she wanted feedback to the world because, of course, it's TikTok generation of what did I do wrong? And to those of us who've been doing this for so long, it was very obvious. She's in a crop top and we can see her stomach and she's got on inappropriately tight pants and all these things that those of us who are, in our 40s are going, well, duh. But those that are in their 20s are going, I don't see anything wrong with what we're doing. So it's a really vast area to start with. And as a parent myself, I do liken it a lot to parenting, for lack of a better term. That is not meant to be demeaning to anybody who's new in their career. It's just for those of us who parent, it's very similar to that. It's teaching you those life skills of what does it mean to actually be here. That's where I think the starting point is our onboarding has to be different. And that's where training starts, right? When we hire somebody into our company.
Before you even go to onboarding, I really think that what you said about putting some emphasis on preparing managers to manage, and that the shift is not just in managing to performance expectations or knowledge and skills to do the job, but it really is all those soft skills surrounding it. And I really like that you said we need to hold a managers accountable for doing that, because ultimately as a manager, you're responsible for what your team does. So I think that's a great call out right there.
Absolutely. And that's a big culture shift just for managers. You were not taught to do those things. You were told actually to leave all those areas alone. Don't get involved in their personal. Don't get involved in why they aren't a resilient person. They either are or they aren't, and they're either going to make it or not. And now we're telling managers, hey, you got to take a step back and you have to work with them on all these areas. So it's a bit of a culture and mind shift for those individuals for sure.
Yeah, and I think when I look at the idea of culture, and again, you give what you get, and you even said you want to set people up for success. And so that's where I think looking at some of the soft skills and some of those other skills, presentation skills and meeting new people and networking and writing reports, all of those things are also part of what's going to create that culture and what people are going to expect. And maybe there's some organizations, that person out there in the crop top, that would be okay. But I think it's again thinking about what kind of culture do you have and what are you going to allow? So what else are we seeing people do? So one, it's setting up the manager, working with those people. What do you think employers can do in those, first 30 days that managers, they've got somebody, it's their first 30 days in, they don't know what they don't know. What should they do to help set them up for success from a talent development standpoint?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing, just like with any new hire, the this part hasn't changed. Get to know your people and understand them as a person, not just their resume and not just from the interview, but what is it about, Becky, or what is it about Ashley? Where do they want to be? Where do they want to grow? Growth is an area that the new hires particularly look for. I mean, over, gosh, 58% of them are looking for that professional development because it's tied to their job satisfaction. That starts on day one. That is a question that many of us hear even in the interview process is, well, what opportunities for growth can your organization provide to us? So it is 100% top of mind for these individuals. So that conversation doesn't have to wait until past their 90 days or past a year of being with the company. It needs to start immediately. Where do they want to be? What, down the road do they see themselves? And when I say about where do they want to be, quote unquote, we've got to also get rid of that traditional mindset of the definition of growth is that ladder. That ladder is no longer a ladder. It is now like a shoots and ladder and it's all over the place and it's like playing the board game.
I've heard rock wall. I like it's a
I
rock
love
wall.
that. Yes, it is 100% a rock a rock wall now, and maybe sometimes it's easy to get to, and maybe sometimes it takes a lot more effort. I am stealing that analogy. That's awesome, but it's not that very simple entry level to junior level to middle to senior to manager to executive. That doesn't exist anymore. It's got to be individualized, which comes down to let's talk about it, but let's also do a gap analysis. What skills do you have today for your current position? What skills are needed that maybe we need to hone in on? And let's focus on those first. But having that open conversation is where it truly begins. They need to understand that that is going to be an ongoing part of their development with the company. You're going to be there every step of the way to help them. You may not be the person actually doing that training for them, it may be a slew of different resources, but having that conversation and setting them on the path, following up with them, how's it going? Are you enjoying? Maybe when they start as a new hire with the company and now it's a year later, they no longer really want to grow in the same direction that they thought they did a year ago. Maybe, something's happened where they've gotten exposure to a different department or vice versa. They've learned that what they thought they wanted to do in life is not really it. So we've all been there.
Yeah, I think that's really taking us it's making that jump then from, again, what I described as being the immediate, what do they need to know the day they walk in? Like, where do I find the bathroom? Where do we go to lunch? We don't take our birthday cakes home, those basic things, and then getting into kind of the short term, which is around what I think of as that rock wall. So then what we're really thinking about is where do I wanna go? Who do I wanna be? I completely agree that it is not always a perfectly straight path or ladder where it's I go from A to B to C to D because there's those lateral opportunities.
Hmm.
There's a huge skill shortage. When I talk to employers, they say people don't have the skills to do the job, but then I also see data out there that says employees feel like they can't meet their career goals at the organizations they're working for. So there's this huge disconnect between the employers and the employees. So I really like the idea of right from the start talking about where do they want to go and then looking at what are those opportunities to develop those paths and that rock wall that again, it might be you might have to jump to the side. You might do something lateral. Your lane may change. Your area of focus may change over time. So, what are some things that internally organizations can do to help give some of those skills? Let's say we've had the conversation, we know where people have an idea of what their interests are from a career development standpoint. What are the things that companies can do to help facilitate that growth and get people into the right job with the right skills?
Absolutely. I think there's so much in this area. And it first of all, a lot of people when we talk about this, they immediately go, "How much is it gonna cost me?" Right? It doesn't always have to cost a lot of money. You can do things from mentoring. So let's say that you have a new hire or somebody who's even 6 months to a year in, and they think they're interested in, growing into a people manager type of position. Work with your current people managers, work with those who maybe are close to the retirement age or who have been with the organization a long time to where maybe their goals are going to look a little different, right? They don't want growth in the sense of moving to a new position anymore. They just want growth towards a happy retirement stage. Use those types of individuals to mentor. You have coaching, which is the ongoing, a little bit different than the mentoring. You can have some job shadow opportunities, things of that nature, but you can also develop a true coach from those individuals instead of again you as maybe their manager feeling like I have 10 people, there's only so many hours in a day and in a week, how am I going to achieve this for everybody? It's not a one person deal. Use all of your resources. The biggest thing I tell a lot of individuals too is let's say you don't have an in-house true training and development, or an L&D as most of us refer to it. That's okay. You don't necessarily need that. There's so many free resources out there. There's LinkedIn Learning. There's just literally getting on Google and just looking up classes for fill in the blank, whether that's I want to learn how to become more of an accountant, or I want to learn how to, improve my presentation skills, things of that nature. There's so many things out there that you can take and do. Now, sure, that's where I'd say, if you're the employee, do some research, see what jumps at you, what looks interesting to you.
I love the idea of thinking about this from, what's free to what's not free, because I think that is a big piece of it. So looking at some of those internal things around mentoring and coaching, I think that can be super successful. But one of the things that I used to hear, and I don't talk about this with employers as much, so you can tell me if it's changed, but I would hear that sometimes those employees that had been there for a long time or that are super seasoned and experienced were hesitant to mentor or coach. And I think part of that was they thought that they were going to be like training somebody else and working themselves out of a job, essentially.
Right.
So that's what I used to hear. Do you still hear that? And if so, what can organizations do to support the mentor as well as the mentee?
Great question. To be honest, no. In the past year or so, I have not heard that as much as what we used to. There has been a huge shift in companies going towards the coaching approach and what that actually means and how it isn't to replace you. There's also been the conversation now that we, for the first time in the workforce, have what, five generations that are in the workforce in some organizations.
Oh, yeah, that could be a whole nother
I know, right?
topic.
That's a whole nother podcast session. We'll have to come back. But with that, you have true succession planning happening for the first time, which removes some of that fear of being replaced that we did absolutely used to have, those conversations with companies. Coaching, though, with more of an understanding of what that is and how it can benefit you as the manager or as the coach, in addition to the person that the new hire or whatever that is that you're coaching, they're seeing the benefit of that come to fruition. They're seeing that now I'm not burned out because this individual can take some of the pieces and I've delegated to them as part of their coaching plan. And because of that, we're starting to lose a lot of the fear that was around that for so long, which is a wonderful thing to see because that is a huge free resource.
I know, 'cause I was like, "This could be win-win," but I feel like back in the day, the last time that I sat, on site with an organization, it was really hard to get people who are willing to open up and share what they knew, so
Yeah.
I love hearing that we've got some more shift in the culture to say, "No, we can all do well here if we support each other."
Absolutely. It's still got a ways to go, but it's very, very pleasant to see and to hear back from a lot of clients that, yeah, they're hearing it, they're seeing it, and excited to see people are working together better now than they used to.
So then if we've got those things happening kind of in that intermediate space, then that takes me to what I think of as the long-term game for talent development. And that is just as you suggested, succession planning. So when I think of succession planning, I think the first part is really in recognizing that you have to figure out which roles matter for succession planning because some of them, quite frankly, they don't.
Right.
Not everything needs to be part of a succession plan. It's really figuring out what is essential for continuity, what happens if it's critical and that person wins the lottery, gets hit by a bus, just says, screw it, I'm not doing this anymore, whatever it is. And so we need to figure out then how do we go about finding the people that are going to fill that and then developing them. So the finding people is finding the internal talent who could fulfill some of those really critical roles if somebody left.
Mhm.
How can companies do that? So in theory, it's nice to say like, okay, yeah, if your executive whatever leaves, we've got somebody internal. How do you figure out who do you go after to develop?
I really think that, my suggestion here is a two-step approach depending on the maturity level of the organization. It's going to be very different for a company that is maybe a little bit more, newer. Maybe they have high growth going on, things of that nature, or even a high population that's hitting that retirement phase, that really understanding what is my that strategy, what's my 1 3 5 so forth years, what skills do I absolutely need, because to your point, what we have today, that role may be because, Ashley's been with the company for 30 years and we've built this role because of Ashley's skill set, not because of what the company actually needs. And this is your opportunity as an organization to truly strategize that. What roles do you truly need?
Yes,
What
yes.
skills are involved in those roles?
Yes, and so much work that I do with organizations, they wanna jump right to the person, whether it's my comp work, whatever it is that a job description, people are so
Yeah,
focused on, like, the person who's in it. So 100% agree. Strategize, what should the role look like, and what are the skill sets needed for that role? Then it's identify the person, and I love that how you then said, "Well, then we measure what's the deficiency and come up with a plan."
absolutely. Yeah. And that's, like I said, that's going to look different for every company depending on what that maturity level is. A more mature organization who's a little bit more stable, not as high growth, et cetera, they're going to be able to do it a little simpler of you may just talk to your people. You may already know your individuals of here's the skill sets. We're very solidified in our roles and it's not about Ashley versus Becky. It is truly about, whatever the position and the function of that position is. So but learning, who has the skill, who wants to grow into that.
Yeah, you have to have the buy-in. You have
Yes.
to have that individual committed once you've identified them. Sometimes I hear from organizations that they don't really know where to start, or they say, "Yeah, like, oh, I know Ashley's going to be the person I would want for this." And so, I personally have used the 9 box, and I have loved that. So, the 9 box for my listeners who don't know is essentially 9 boxes, and it's a scale that says we look at people who are underperforming, are they an effective performer, or are they an outstanding performer? And then we evaluate them based on potential. Are they low, medium, or high potential? And so with that grid, that's a good way to simply capture the things that you know about. This is somebody who I would really go for. And so this is the person that I want to do that skills analysis and figure out what we need versus that person who's like, maybe they're in the right place and they're never going to be something more. Then going to them and getting that buy in. I don't know. I have some stress around the fact that I've seen organizations who don't talk to the people that they've identified for the succession plan, so they don't really know what's happening. And then if they think, well, going back to, I don't know if I can advance my career here. Meanwhile, people are talking about you behind your back and think you're like the bee's knees, but you don't know it. So I think the communication is super, super important.
Absolutely. I was just going to reiterate that. I mean, it's all conversations. And for some reason, some people are scared to have those, but you have to be able to talk about it and be open and honest with from an employee standpoint. There's nothing that's going to happen if you say, no, I genuinely don't want to be a CEO one day. Be honest, right?
Or maybe you have people that you're thinking, this is one I see a lot. I've worked with a lot of technical organizations where you have people like engineers. And so they say, we've got people who are really great as engineers. Maybe they do some decent project management. So let's make them the department manager. And they fail horribly because people managing is a whole different ballgame. Especially as times continue to change, it's not just do you have the skills to do the job as we started with, it's all those different soft skills that go into it. So making sure that as you grow people, again, looking at do they even want to do that? Where do they want to be? Super critical. Okay, let's come back to then if we have an organization and they're really not doing much around talent development. They don't know, either they're small, they hadn't really thought about it and now they're like, gosh, maybe I should start thinking about this. Where do you start? What's the first thing to do?
Honestly, I say talk. Start talking, right? Start talking at your senior level. Who is going to be here? Who isn't going to be here? What is our game plan and strategy when it comes to that? But also start talking to your frontline employees. It's just a matter of a question of where do you want to go? What do you want to do? It doesn't have to be in depth. It doesn't come with this long list of things that you have to check the box on. It is just a genuine conversation of who do we have and where do you want to go? One of the things that make it effective is that you genuinely take an individual approach, not a one box fits all. And I love, 9 box to be honest, after gosh, 22 years in HR, I myself just learned about 9 box like a year and a half ago, which is crazy to me, but I love it because I'm always learning and throw it at me. But I love that I'm hearing more companies, they used to only do it with managers and the managers completed it. And it was almost like a review, right? Without the self evaluation part where you did it. And that's wonderful. But where's the employees' input in that? And what I'm hearing now is, learning from individuals that no, we sit down with them, we do our part, they do it, and we sit down and we look at our boxes together.
Yes, that is such a good point. It's not just a performance review, and it's not that's one piece of it when we talk talent development is the performance review, But it really is then, well, where does that person go from here and what do they want and what
Mhm.
do we need as an organization? Yes, yes, yes. It's got to be all of these different pieces.
Absolutely.
Okay, so my next question I have very strong opinions about, but I'm gonna not give you my strong opinions. I'm gonna let you answer. So let's say you sit down and you have somebody and they're good and you see a lot of potential in them and they're doing a good job in their role. So that's somebody who you would tap is like, ooh, this is the person we want for development. And let's say they're like, "Well, honestly, I've got this side hustle going, and my 5-year plan, my hopefully 3-year plan is that I don't have to work here anymore because I'm gonna be over here. My side hustle is going to be my primary source of income." As an organization or a manager, what do you say or how do you respond to
Gosh,
that?
Becky, I honestly one of my favorite quotes is by Richard Branson, and his quote is that you train your people well enough that they can leave your organization, but you treat them well enough that they wanna stay. And I
Oh,
live by
I
that
love
quote as an
that.
HR professional because everybody has a dream, right? My gosh, if you had talked to 17-year-old me, I wanted to be a Broadway star. Obviously, all these years later, I'm not on Broadway, right? We're not talking because I'm a rocket and I just performed in the Macy's Day Parade or something. So we're having a different conversation. And I love where my life is. But that's to the point of where everybody has a dream. And who are you, whether you're a manager, CEO, a colleague, it doesn't matter. But who are you to kill that person's dream? We as a society should all support each other,
Yes.
right? And that starts with
Yes,
that.
and I'm so glad I love your quote and your answer because here's where I get so fucking mad is when an employer says, "Well, this person only thinks they're gonna be here for 3 years." Well, most of your employees are probably only gonna be there for 3 years. If you look at the data, especially if they're a newer employee, yeah, maybe half of them are gonna be there 3 years. But you could get 3 really great years. Not every job is something where, like, we need to keep everybody forever. As an organization, not all turnover is bad turnover. So I love that it's, okay, we've talked to that person. Let's keep using them. If you've got somebody that's like, "Hey, they're great in their role," and they don't want great, use them in their role and let them be great at that. Not everybody has to be going to that next thing. And if on the side their thing takes off and they leave, okay, at least I got those 3 good years. Take advantage of the time that you do have with people, but then I love that part of your quote about, well, let's treat them so that they wanna stay. Love,
Absolutely. And who
love,
knows?
love
You
it.
never know what 3 years they could, right? But what if also what they're doing on the side gig now turns into an additional resource for you? Don't close
I
doors.
mean, 3 years ago, if you said, like, "Are you gonna be recording a podcast?" I would've been like, "Oh my god, hell
Right?
no."
Right. Who knew? Who knew? Things change. And so, yeah, leave those doors open. Leave them wide open. Leave your windows open too. The old saying that window closes and a door opens. Leave all of it open. And don't turn away people simply because they don't want to do what you want to do and what you envisioned for them. This is the difference of, at the beginning when we started talking that you kind of are a parent when you're a manager nowadays with some of the younger generation. This is where that parenting stops. You can't be mad and upset with them because they don't want to do what you had envisioned them with your organization. It's okay. Still treat them the same. Still grow them, and because you have no idea where that's going to turn out in 3 years. A lot of things can change in that time frame.
So, throughout our conversation today, one of the things that actually makes me really happy is that we have not even talked about things like tuition reimbursement, loan repayment assistance, things like that, which those are the things that I think people go to in their mind when they think about talent development. They think, it's gonna cost me a lot because I have to pay for student loans or I have to pay for tuition for people, and I just can't afford to do that. So, those are amazing resources and tools that are out there. So, kudos, awesome if you can do that. But as we've talked about today, there really is so much more that you can do. So, I think the world is full of opportunity and you can get creative as an employer. So, go crazy with your creative thinking. Think about ways to help people grow and talk to them to figure out what it is that they want and make sure that you're aligned. Any final words for us, Ashley, on talent development, things that we need to be thinking about?
It doesn't have to cost you a lot, but I think the only other missing piece is don't limit these opportunities to just your top performers or your tenured employees. This should be everybody in your organization. It's not a one size fits all. It is individualized, which means that you can have some fun with it. It's not a mundane task. that you as a manager have to pursue, or you as, the leader of an organization, you get to have a lot of fun and a lot of creativity with it. So go out there, Google, use AI. Gosh, we haven't even gotten into that part of it, right? Use all those resources to see where, and it'll be amazing how much you learn throughout that process too.
Love it. I am definitely a lifelong learner myself. I'm just genuinely curious. And so I love to see it when an employer has those conversations and really helps people grow and do the best. So thank you so much for joining us, Ashley. I really appreciate your thoughts and your insight on talent development.
No, it's a pleasure. I love being here. Thanks for having me.
All right. And to our other listeners, keep coming back. We have a lot more around our culture series and total rewards, again, to make sure that you are living up to who you want to be and taking care of your people so that they in turn take care of you. Come back and listen to us again.
That's it for this episode of the Gorilla HR podcast. We hope you found some unconventional wisdom and actionable advice to help you in your own HR journey. Remember, we're all working together to build better workplaces. Want to join in the conversation? Send us your questions, stories, and maybe even your own guerrilla tactics to podcast@gorilla-hr.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your network. Until next time,